Ladies and gentlemen, on the other side, let's talk about the future of intelligent commerce. How AI is rewiring the way the world transacts. And this is going to be an incredible topic on the other side as we move ahead and introduce our speakers. But meanwhile, for all the ones in the room, may we request you all to not crowd towards the stage or the podium area. May we urge you all to kindly stay seated and allow us the opportunity of inviting our speakers. With that, let me now call upon the moderator of this session. Let's give it up to Mr. Amit Goel, founder and managing partner, GAI Ventures. May I now call upon Mr. Jalpesh Chitalia, Vice President, Growth Products, Visa Inc. Mr. Nitendra Rajput, SVP and Head AI Garage, Mastercard. Mr. Ravi Garg, Director and Head Business Messaging and Payments India, Meta. And ladies and gentlemen, if I may now invite Mr. Sujit Mishra, Director Payments, APAC Stores and WW Digital Business, Amazon. And as our panelists are here seated, it is time for me to pass on the live baton to Mr. Goel to take it forward.
Thank you. So I think we should start with a question just to understand like where we are in terms of understanding. How many people know about agentic commerce? Raise of hands. Okay, so maybe it might be a good idea to sort of first start with a little journey of how agentic commerce would work. What is the vision, right? So let me try to do it, and then I'll pass it over to the experts. So imagine like there's a consumer Pooja. She's searching for protein bars. And let's say there are some specifications, right? At least 15 grams of protein in a certain price range and no sugar, of course. And now let's say they're searching on ChatGPT or one of these products, Perplexity or Gemini, and there are like 3 or 4 results which come out. Now imagine the agent is doing rest of the journey. The agent actually goes and basically identifies, does the authentication on Amazon.com or one of the e-commerce sites, Shopify sites, and then adds the stuff to the cart, and then does the payment checkout using some technology that we are going to talk about. That entire thing is happening in the background, and the agents are doing the shopping, right from discovery to the identity, authentication, adding to the cart, and doing the checkout as well. So today's topic is agentic commerce. We are going to talk about various things. Of course, this is a fintech festival, so payments is very important. Payments is like one of the most important part of the commerce journey. It comes at the end, but it is a very important part of the journey. So we are going to talk a lot about that. So that kind of sets the agenda of what we are going to talk about today. My first question is actually open to everyone. I would like to basically ask it to all of you, your views on how do you see agentic commerce from your perspective, right? Given like we have pretty much trillions of dollars worth of companies sitting here, they will enable these consumer experiences, payment experiences in that commerce journey. So you have a really great vantage point in terms of understanding what is going on. And we are very early in AI, right, overall, and then in commerce and payments. So would really like to understand, maybe we can start from you, Jim.
Thank you, Amit. And so what I'd say is, I think if I were to step back a little bit, like we went on a scenic route on defining what an agentic commerce system looks like. The natural progression for most of the people is, hey, it looks like e-commerce, agents buying online, like you said, and which is true, and it is incremental to e-commerce. And that's exactly how we tried to solve many times in many iterations until now. And for the last couple of years, we've been trying to look at it more deeply and broadly. And one of the things we landed upon early this year is a definition of what an agentic software or intelligent software looks like. If you look at the commerce evolution for the last many decades, many thousands of years, it has always been, for the vast amount of our life and humanity, a human-to-human endeavor. Humans would always go transact with a human being to go and exchange value, and that is where payments came to begin. 30 years ago, somebody decided to open up internet, and that led to e-commerce as we now know, or digital commerce as we now know. And what ended up happening is e-commerce allowed one side of the ecosystem in the commerce value chain to become a software. And that was merchant side. That was a seller side. That was a payee side, if you would. What intelligent commerce is happening, where intelligent commerce comes into play, is where the buyer side is being replaced by a software. Now, instead of buyer sitting on a chair, shopping online, and talking to somebody else's software, that is now going to be delegated to a buyer software going and doing exactly what you said. Pooja will now go and say, hey, find me the protein bar. You know my preferences. It has to be less than $200. And it's possible today. It's happening today, to your point, in Perplexity, in Amazon Buy for Me, in a bunch of places, right? So, and now that software will go, browse the web, find the items, go to a merchant location, go to a checkout page, use a bunch of APIs that, like, for example, Visa's providing or other providers are providing, and you could go and receive a payment credential as an agent and shop on behalf of Pooja. So that is intelligent commerce. Again, we are on the path of getting there, and I think there are multiple paths to getting there. The key difference is the software is on the buyer side now, not on the seller side alone.
Interesting. Nitendra?
Yeah. I mean, there are, there's a story that if there is an elephant in the room, then there are 6 blind men, and one of them will actually touch the tail and then say it's actually a rope. The other blind person will actually touch the legs and say it's actually a pillar, and so on, which is what we are trying to define here. And my perspective on agentic commerce is somewhat of this fact that when I was a child, or even a grown-up, the way I would buy things is that I would go to a particular store near me, 2 kilometers, 5 kilometers, that was my reach. Now, whatever was available at that particular store is what I would buy. Maybe there's a better product at a cheaper price 40 kilometers down the road, but it was hard to discover that. That was commerce in those days. Then came e-commerce. Now I sit on a website and I search for products and I get all kinds of products. The discoverability increased significantly. For me as a customer and for a merchant, the discoverability to a specific customer increased, and that's why commerce kind of went to a next level. What I feel is that what e-commerce did to commerce, agentic commerce is going to do to e-commerce. And the reason is that today if I have to do e-commerce, if I have to search for a watch, let's say, I would go to a particular website and search for it on that website. Maybe I didn't like stuff. I would go to the second website, max third, not more than that. If there was an agent which was searching for me, it could crawl the entire web and say, here are those 3,500 watches, which is again a problem for me because how will I figure out among those 3,500 which one is most relevant? Here comes another agent which tells me, or which does on my behalf, it realizes that, oh, actually I am a fitness type of a person because I had invested in past in the gym membership. I had recently bought running shoes and so on. So the smartwatch that is relevant for me is something that gives me some aerobic health related data and so on. And suddenly my choices reduce. So agents are going to do these powerful things which could not be scaled by humans, both at a merchant level and at a consumer level, scaled significantly. That's where hyper-personalization comes in. And I think the most important thing is that the discoverability would increase tremendously. Now, how would it change commerce in another way is that if I as a merchant know that now people are looking at very specific things, I would not make one shirt of one size. I would make shirts of multiple sizes, of multiple textures, of multiple colors. So suddenly the entire economy is going to get disrupted because of this fact that we are able to deliver specific things easily discoverable to consumers. And that's why I feel that agentic commerce is going to be a significant change in the entire economy, perhaps.
Thank you. Ravi, from your perspective, especially you are like a giant in the consumer experiences space. What is your view, especially also from a, what will the experience look like and what will be the UX UI?
Absolutely. We run almost across our 3 platforms, almost 3.5 billion consumers engage with us every week. That's the scale that at which Meta operates. And we do believe, like I heard Jalpesh and Nitendra say, AI will change a lot how consumers engage with businesses. Discovery is one piece where you don't need to going to a particular website. Like you can just go to any of the apps and just say, I want this type of product, a blue shirt, size 42. It can scan across all the ecosystem of companies that are building products, and it can bring you in your front, and you can choose one, and it will just go ahead and buy, like Jalpesh said, automatically there. The bigger transformation, while we are talking most on the consumer side, we do believe it will also transform the merchant side of the ecosystem dramatically. Today, if you talk of e-commerce, and like Nitendra said, from commerce, which is physical commerce, to e-commerce, it became a domain of few large companies. Many small businesses were left out. And the only way they could engage was they have to list on big platforms and maybe get discovered and maybe sell. Also, these guys don't have resources to build large capable platforms with AI. They don't have people to service. I think AI will transform the ecosystem dramatically, where commerce will no longer be a domain of few large companies globally. Anybody in this room, anybody outside this room, a small merchant can do commerce. Like at Meta, we are building an AI agent for every small business. We have WhatsApp small business app. We have 200 million small businesses globally there. Each of them will have an agent. Like today, if you open a shop, you are there from 9 to 6. You can only service so many customers physically. But imagine every shop having an agent on a digital surface, 24 hours. Any customer who just places an order, the agent will service the order on behalf of the merchant. Merchant doesn't even need to be there. It can give you the product. It can negotiate with the customer. It can fulfill the transaction, which means it's collecting the payment. It can place a delivery order to the delivery agency, and the product gets delivered. That's the vision we see. Yes, on the consumer side, every consumer will get a lot of choice, and AI will do a lot of stuff. But we also believe merchants will get really transformed with AI. Every merchant will have an AI agent, which will just be doing things for him and hopefully grow their business. Just one more thing, which we are doing extension to that. Merchants will be able to run ads through AI. As in, you don't even need to define an ad. You just say, this is my product. The AI agent will just go and run the ad wherever it's possible, generate demand, fulfill the demand on its own, and his business grows. So that's how we see both on the consumer side, massive transformation, but also on the merchant side, equally big transformation that's happening in the ecosystem.
Right. We have so much richness of experience and background in this panel. So, let me switch to you, Sujit. Given you are like the biggest e-commerce company in the world, and you must be looking at agentic commerce. What is your perspective? How it will look like? What is going to be your role in that?
Sure, thank you. No, I think the panel really spoke about how this is going to democratize commerce, both on the consumer side and the merchant side as well, right? I think this whole journey of commerce from the barter system to currency to digital world has been quite transformative. I think what has stayed consistent in all of this is human outcomes. I think agentic commerce is going to drive more predictable, more transparent, and more inclusive outcomes for both customers and merchants. What do I mean by inclusive? I think if you talked about the example of Pooja as a consumer. Just imagine Pooja coming from a rural town, doesn't know how to use technology. The ability to just look for that protein bar, or I'm assuming she still buys protein bar here, but anyways, the ability to look for that product, have the right specifications without having to actually understand how to press these buttons, where to click, what to do. I think the outcome still remains the same, but human outcomes are going to become more inclusive by trying to be more, having a larger part of society included into it, be more predictable, because I know what I want. I know this is what I can say. Hey, I need this product with a seller rating of this. At least 10,000 people should have bought it, so it can get more predictable and it will get more transparent. So I think what is happening with, I think Jalpesh talked about it in the sense that while commerce is evolving, I think as we look at the evolution of digital commerce, agentic commerce, these outcomes are getting more and more inclusive and predictable. And that's going to be the biggest innovation I feel in this whole journey.
Right, that's a very important point. So I think some parts of this commerce journey are very well understood now, given I think most of the people in the room would have used ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, one of those things. And so, how you search for things and the kind of results you get, that discovery part of it is quite evident. I think what happens after that is still something that we would like to understand, right, in this room. So there are two parts to it. Now, let's say I go back to the protein bar example, and the search results had Amazon as one of the results. How do you do the identity authentication part of it, and how do you do the payments part of it? Like, is there a preferred payments card? Is it tokenized? Is it tokenized in a different way? If you guys can throw some light on, from your perspective on some of these things, identity authentication payments.
That's a full platform, if you would. So I think on identity, so I'll start with payments first, and maybe we go in the reverse order. So it'll have to be tokenized in our mind. That tokenization has solved a certain problem. We don't want to go backwards a little bit, right? Like in any which way. So, and especially in this country, regulators have helped us innovate security with both two-factor authentication as well as tokenization from ground up. 98% of the market, at least as we understand, is fully tokenized. About 500 million tokens, a billion tokens or so, tokenized in the wild here across the country. So that's obviously a very, very large sort of success story that we want to go on the coattails of, if you would. As an agent, when you're shopping on behalf of a consumer after the discovery, to your point, the identity piece is largely around how do I go and get a consumer authorize an agent and provide a limited delegation authority from a consumer to an agent. Like in this model of Pooja searching something, let's say on ChatGPT, saying, buy me just this item for less than 500 rupees, and you could buy it within a day. And if that is my authority, then agent should be able to go and buy only that limited item within that price and within a certain constraint. So that tokenization will have to be somewhat smarter than and more programmable than the tokenization that exists today. Because tokens, when you give it to a certain merchant, you could select a transaction amount, you could review everything as a consumer when you go to a merchant website, and then complete a purchase. Now, agents acting on your behalf, you're giving your card to somebody else to complete a purchase. You need a level of security that's a much higher grade than when you are going to a merchant website. So that consent, that authorization, and we talked about biometrics just in a previous panel. I think I was listening to the panel there. So, and then ensuring that everything has a biometric credential to ensure that the consumer was actually there with the right set of standards that UPI has just recently defined in terms of ensuring that, NPCI, sorry, so as recently defined. So the idea is like ensuring that the consumer has signed the credential using their biometric on that device, using tokenization, limited control with programmability. So I think all of that combined will enable agents, and I think, Sujit, you mentioned this, like it creates an inclusive sort of economy at scale by ensuring that consumers will have the freedom to do what they want and freedom to delegate what they want, right? So I think with security and with safety. So that's where we are at least coming from. I'm sure, like, a lot more to your point, it's an elephant. You see a rope if you touch a rope. So let us know how the leg looks like.
I think that's the benefit of, honestly, events like this where we learn from each other different perspectives, and which is a benefit to the society that when each organization comes up with their own solutions, they add up and then the society benefits perhaps. With respect to the identity part of it and authorization part of it, one of the interesting things that when we talk about agents, certainly there is this tendency within us that how can agents do an authorization on my behalf? Because I as a human am perhaps the most smart person, that's what we all feel. But if we take a step back and see the kind of frauds that are happening these days, a majority of them are social engineering fraud, and the weakest link in a social engineering fraud is a human. Humans somehow get tricked to share stuff, their OTPs and so on, and that's how the fraud happens most of the times. If human is the weakest link, agents are actually replacing that human so that that weakest link is removed. So that's a good thought to have, perhaps a positive thought to have, definitely. The other way where AI and agents can benefit from doing specific authorizations and identities is that you can have very, very personalized interventions, personalized friction controls, not like what is your mother's maiden name or put this OTP and so on, but something that can be contextualized, something that had happened just in the recent past, because now these things are driven by agents. There's no rule sitting there that you have to drive that rule throughout and so on. So I think those will empower the existing strong ecosystem. We have biometrics, we have tokenization, we have passkeys. So on top of that, when AI and these agentic systems are going to layer in these more personalized and contextual authentication mechanisms, that will make the payment ecosystem even more stronger and secure, which can drive more autonomous payments and agent-driven payments rather than human-driven payments. I think that's where agentic commerce will get a strong push from as well.
From your perspective, given like outside US, I think most of the world today relies on WhatsApp to communicate. And most of the businesses, especially I can tell you from Fintech, payments, AI, I think people are sending proposals and everything on WhatsApp. So how will sort of, if you start the journey in WhatsApp to buy something, how will all of these things come into play? Identity, authentication, payments.
Honestly, I'll say one thing even before I get to WhatsApp. I think the form factors are changing dramatically with AI. It's no longer about a device or a PC or a phone. Today we just announced a payment on Ray-Ban glasses, a very different form factor, which is, we're talking of wearables and things like that. So identity, and WhatsApp will be there integrated in all these. So WhatsApp is an app on many of these things. So identity is no longer going to be about one app or one particular solution that you have and you create identity across apps. It will have to be interoperable across form factors, across platforms, across devices. Like at Meta, we have Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and now wearables. You can't have 4 different identities and you can't manage them differently. And it's no longer about creating a secured PIN or things like that, because that's passe. So that's where we are believing that this whole concept of identity and security and verification will change dramatically. We are investing a lot around biometrics and things like that, where a user's identity will be interoperable across our platforms. And anything he does, part of it is tokenization, where anything he does will be stored in a digital way. And he can use that identity across platforms. The system will, through whatever identity that you create, whether it's biometrics or in the form, the system will identify you are the same person, and you will carry forward the conversation or the transaction that you did in one place somewhere, and will just continue from there. It's no longer about just identifying you, it's about continuing the whole journey from start to end across multiple platforms, across multiple form factors. That's the vision with which we are building the ecosystem, and clearly the way people will identify on these platforms will be different than where it is today. Biometrics probably for us will play a big role in that sense.
Right. So is there also a very specific question, about, apart from the general question that I'm asking here, that a lot of AI application layer companies like us, we are trying to sort of do these experiments for agentic commerce and hitting Amazon.com. And, of course, there are CAPTCHA and all of that. So how do you see that world, right? Like a lot of third-party agents coming and trying to transact on Amazon.com, and what happens next?
Yeah, I think yeah, it's an interesting question. I would just say, if you look at this whole agentic or AI-driven commerce, I think the 4 fundamental pillars on which this will rest. One, the first and most important thing is consent. Customer consent, which is simple but yet revocable, right? We need to have that in place for any fundamental. The second part of this whole thing has to be about interoperability. I think we forget the part that, for all of this to work, you need this to operate across, and the Visas and the Mastercards of the world have proven how interoperability has driven payments to such a large scale from a digital standpoint, right? But I think we need to get to a point where we start thinking about how agentic AI will impact interoperability. The third part of this conversation is to my earlier point, is about how we measure transparency and inclusion for everything. To the point that you hitting the Amazon.com API, I think there are like several examples of this across the world, but getting customer consent and ensuring that consumers know what they are signing up for, and they have an ability and a recourse to take is going to be the critical part of this whole. So I would say the whole basis of this is three-pronged: interoperability, consent management, and transparency. As some of these agentic softwares evolve, building this into the toolkit is going to be critical for all these agentic layers to actually access data and try and make the life of the consumer easier.
Who will build that and who will own it? That is my next $1 trillion question.
Yeah, so I think who will build, like, I think to Nitendra's point, I think like everybody's trying to go and define approach, like define what agentic commerce is, forget about the approach. But I think going back to Sujit, exactly what you said is what we announced on April 30th at Product Drop for Visa, like our CEO and CPO did that publicly in the US. It's a global platform. So we came up with a dream or a simple idea of allowing an agent to shop on behalf of all of our 5 billion users and at every single merchant location, 100 million merchant location, 100 to 150 million merchant locations in the world without any friction. And what that means is like you have ubiquitous acceptance and access to all consumers. But as you build that capability, what we require, and I think we talked about it, like 4 key services that we ask agents to go and build. And that purpose of the key services is to drive incremental trust. Like if you think about like what we're talking about here, whether it's Sujit's point or the points that have been made before, is from a merchant's perspective, there is lack of transparency in terms of identifying, is this a good bot or a bad bot? There is lack of knowledge that this is actually acting on behalf of consumer or not acting on behalf of consumer. So those are the, like, and then like, is agent actually doing the right thing? Is meeting the consent or not meeting the consent? So there are a lot of like areas of failure that would likely occur when you're delegating something to a software. So we looked at that and we stepped back and said, you know what, there are 4 key services that are needed. So 1, tokenization, we've talked about that. 2nd, verification, authentication. In this market, talking about authentication and verification is repeating what has been done by regulation for many, many years. So we're using payment passkeys, we are using 3DS on the merchant side to optimize UX. So we're doing all of that in addition to tokenization. The next 2 services are the most important services that are incremental, new, that are essential for agentic commerce to work. And the first is what we call as payment instruction. What that enables is allows a consumer to register a consent, provide a limited delegated authority to the agent. So in that Pooja's example again, so Pooja is giving consent to an agent saying, go buy me this thing, let's say presumably from Amazon.com, this bar for a certain amount, so I don't have to go and do it. And then I could go back to my meeting or attend the panel or what have you, right? And I'm good with that. And now that agent has the authority to just do that part, and that part very reliably on a merchant website. So when they go to Amazon.com, and I think slightly fictitious example because we don't support login yet, but I think, so if they go to Amazon.com, Pooja gets recognized by Amazon, they recognize that this is coming through an agent, it's trusted by Visa, and the Visa Trusted Indicator also provides ability for Amazon to know that that means the consent was collected, the consumer was authenticated, the consumer has signed the credentials, so everything looks legit. I'm going to allow this agent to pass and access my website. But otherwise, if none of these things were true, if they did not have the indicator that says this is a trusted agent from a network that Amazon trusts, then they'd basically go and say, like, it's a CAPTCHA. I don't want access to my IP, which could be price information. Like, you don't want your reviews to be seen by an agent. You don't want to see a price information to be seen by the agent. There's so many merchant concerns that we have discovered, so I think that becomes very important. So what we're doing is 2 parts of trust layer. One is building trust between agent and merchant, agent and issuer, or a consumer with tokenization, authentication, and payment instruction. The last API is payment signals between agent and Visa. Because now agent has gone to a merchant website, found everything that Pooja wanted, and then they like collect all of the data and send to the payment network, in this case Visa, and saying, this is what I found on behalf of Pooja's transaction. So we will go and validate the intent before they can actually receive the tokenized payment credential to shop on Amazon.com. And that tokenized credential is now available for ChatGPT to transact on behalf of Pooja's card, let's say SBI card, and can only be used at Amazon, can only be used for that like 200 rupees in that example. And that's the only limited authority that they have. So, and we've built the platform. We've got a couple of partners doing live transactions at this point in the US and in Hong Kong. But very, very early transaction sort of stage. Again, like I basically go and say, requires a lot of humility because all of us don't know how this will pan out. This is very early days. We're very early transactions. We need to work with merchants. We need to work with banks, issuers across the board to ensure that this works for them. It needs to be transparent. It needs to drive trust. And it needs to show data that this is low fraud and we're avoiding problems that merchants and issuers worry about on a day in and day out.
Right. Yesterday, actually, OpenAI also announced, basically now apps SDK. So you can actually have your app. So one of the questions that I always think about is where will the consumers go first? Where will the journey start? Because everything looks like a platform in a few years from now. So that's going to be very interesting, but let's not go there. I think there are two very important questions I wanted to cover in the remaining time that we have. Maybe we reverse the order now. Let's start from you, Sujit. Let's talk about fraud and what kind of fraud vectors we will see now and how to think about risk and fraud.
Sure. I think that's a very interesting state of affairs. I think we, all of us in different forms and fraud are dealing with fraud on a day-to-day basis. And this is not just fraud. In the old days, commerce fraud used to be restricted to a geography. Now, with this advent of, how the world is evolving, we are seeing, with consumers, merchants, all different parts of the world, and fraud is. I think with agentic commerce, it's going to be even more interesting because we don't even know who's going to be sitting on the other side. Who's actually the one who's shopping? Is that a bot or is that a human being? Like today, we are talking about identity and strengthening identity, which obviously is important. I think it's the point I was trying to make earlier about consent management, and interoperability are going to play a critical role in terms of how we start looking at fraud, and because the next set of fraud vectors are not going to come from consumers. They will come from bots, which is already happening in some form and manner, right? So understand, to the point that was made, to understand that this is the identity has been given by a human being. It is contextual, and being able to match that is going to be very key for combating the next set of fraud. I think AI presents a very interesting opportunity where, both on the merchant and the card networks and the issuer side, that we'll be able to try and use that to, identify pockets of fraud and bring that, but it also provides an opportunity for fraudsters to start thinking about how. So systems have to continuously start evolving to us to actually handle the next evolution in fraud and fraud management that needs to come in.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand. So what is your thought, given, there's so much of this initial consumer experience may start from one of your platforms. How do you think about fraud vectors and risk that is there?
We see a lot already happening on our platform, even though AI is very nascent today. And I don't think it'll be a one-point solution. It'll be constantly evolving journey, the way the platforms evolve. Fraudsters will evolve and technology will have to evolve. Working with that, we are actually investing. One of our biggest investment today on AI has gone into fraud prevention on the platforms. And we capture massive signals across the 3 platforms where we figure out whether it's a fraudster doing some scam or, like you said, it's an AI agent which is trying to scam multiple people and all that. And we are building that whole vector to prevent there. Like we said, we'll have to start looking at this journey at every stage. It won't be like, hey, something has happened and now let's build a solution there. So at Meta, we are actually building in parallel. So on one end, yes, we are building the best of AI tools and AI agents that people will do, but we are equally investing in preventing frauds and scams via AI on our platform, so that every time there's some action happening, there's a signal coming, that signal is validated, whether it's genuine consumer or it's a scam coming from either an AI or a human being, and we are immediately intervening and dropping that action or preventing that action from happening. So for us, it's going to be co-development. On one end, we'll develop AI agents and the best of solutions for both consumers and businesses, but simultaneously build fraud prevention tools as well, which is where we are doing even today.
Right.
Yeah. I can talk for the next 8 minutes only on fraud and substance. But I think remembering commerce again, when my exposure to fraud was, let's say if I were to go to a bank and withdraw 300,000 rupees, my exposure was at 3 kilometers that I had to cycle back. Here, when I make any particular transaction, my exposure is all the internet that goes with respect to reaching a particular merchant, from a merchant to a issuer, and so on and so forth. So the exposure is significantly high. Fraud used to be a preventive mechanism that when a fraud happens, let me try and figure that out. We at Mastercard changed a lot of that with announcing what is called as Decision Intelligence Pro, where we actually could figure out synthetic transactions that can actually come in the future and therefore prevent fraud before that. We have something called as emerging fraud monitor, which means a fraud that has not happened right now, but it will emerge in the future, and let's protect our systems right now from that. Now coming back to the agentic world, looks like the fraud could happen from some things which are these LLMs. We've seen how LLMs are hallucinating. We've seen how LLMs can be induced into saying something that they were not supposed to say. So now protecting such LLMs is going to be a part of protecting the payments and the fraud in their payments ecosystem as well. So as and when new technology comes in, there are new fields. So what we do is we protect a transaction, we protect cards that may have been leaked on the dark web, so let's reissue them. We protect merchants, so there are a lot of merchants that set up their shop, they take all the card details and they vanish in the next 1 week. So we have products which actually identify such merchants as well. So every time a new entity comes in, it of course with it brings in some possibilities of fraud injections. Here the new technology that is coming in is LLMs and agents and MCPs perhaps. So we are building in solutions on top of those so that we protect those so that the remaining ecosystem continues to be strong, which is why I feel very bullish from the fraud perspective when the agentic commerce comes in.
I'll try and do a quick one. On fraud at Visa, I think we've been doing AI and fraud models for the longest time, 33 years now. I would say, I think there is a traditional fraud aspect that Visa is obviously in the leading providers of fraud scores. We've now externalized those for non-Visa transactions as well, and that's been very effective in UK, for example, for RTP schemes. So that, I think, that's a BAU thing, and to Nitendra's point, I think all of us have done that for a while. So that's BAU, business as usual. What we're now focused on, and I think your question also, to an extent, like what would be new in an agentic space, right? And the fact that there is a new entry or an entity involved in this business, there is more disintermediation, more man-in-the-middle opportunity than it existed between consumer shopping on a merchant website and introduction of that. So even these agents are not necessarily building their own models. They're depending on third-party models. The third-party models can have this own one. So there is a lot more going on there. So what we built is a set of tools in the ecosystem, including communication layer between agents and merchants, but primarily also agent to Visa communication and agent to consumer communication. This whole notion of payment instruction and payment signals are designed to avoid fraud and avoid disputes. Imagine like today's CNP transaction, card not present transaction. You go and key enter card number on a merchant website. That merchant transaction goes to from a consumer to a merchant to a gateway, PSP, acquirer, Visa, and then we identify and then score that transaction. We are industry leading, but that's too late to identify everything. To Nitendra's point as well, to an extent, it's like mitigating fraud, avoiding fraud. But now in this notion, we know consumers' intent up front. We know what consumers likely to buy, what they do want to buy, because we have the payment instruction that says Pooja wants to buy this protein bar for less than 200 rupees from anywhere within a certain time frame. Now when agent goes and tries to buy those things, we want to ensure that that transaction, with the signals that we receive in terms of where are they buying, what are they buying, if that same information was available after the transaction, we had 200 milliseconds to go and score everything and guide entire ecosystem, and should you accept or not accept. Now we have information before agent receives a payment credential. So one is the improvement of fraud models that we already have, and we obviously continue to do that. But it's also rethinking how disputes and fraud and claims should work. And that is what Visa has been spending a ton of time in the last 6-9 months in redesigning disputes, in redesigning fraud models, and architecture around how the fraud would occur. So I think there is a lot more to be done. Obviously, again, early days. We're all like applying human humility lens here, along with the lens of what could be the possibility. But I think we need to learn a lot from the ecosystem.
If tokenizing cards was hard enough, now this is going to be
This is
like
gonna be harder.
5 billion card tokens and all that volume was still okay. Now there'll be like 10 billion agents and we'll have, we'll be doing all these transactions. I actually wanted to ask you, Ravi, one specific question because we have discussed a lot about consumer. I wanted to ask you, given your experience with the small and medium businesses and SMEs, as AI gets embedded in payments, financial services, how do you see that segment of customer benefiting from this?
You mean from the AI?
Yes.
So, like I said, across the platforms, we are actually investing in building tools, which all the small businesses across ecosystem of the globe, we almost service 200 to 300 million small businesses across Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp, where they have that. And we are building native agents across the platforms, where these small businesses can actually build a business without having any other tool and run their business. Today, while people may in this room know, many of them may be using it, Instagram is one of the largest commerce platforms in the world. Largest, probably. A lot of commerce happens on Instagram. But these are small merchants selling home-based products, lifestyle products, and things like that. And what they need is scale. Now, they will never have money to invest in building big brands and things like that. And that's where the tools around AI that we are building is helping them build scale across, including payments and things like that, where these merchants just put their product in catalog, and then after that, AI takes over everything. It will identify what's the catalog, what type of audience it will, based on signals that we get on Instagram or Facebook, what type of audience it is. It will generate ads, it will run ads, it will create demand and fulfill demand for that. That's where we see, so we are investing in actually tools, AI agents for every single business. And you said 10 billion agents. We expect it to be way more because every business and every consumer will have more than one agent. It's not about one agent. So that's how we see the whole ecosystem evolving on both sides. On one end, consumer side, people will have agents who will do shopping for them. On merchant side, there'll be agents which will fulfill the order and demand for them. And hopefully people will have a nice vacation where business is happening on their own through the agents on this thing.
Right. Any last thoughts? We have like 30 seconds left.
No, I think like we talked about risk, and I don't want to end with risk and fraud issues. Just like e-commerce, everybody thought it was like pretty gloomy and things would break, the businesses would get disrupted. But if you just look at the macroeconomics, e-commerce has been generally a huge boon to the mankind. The reason why we're all connected, the reason why we can discover things on our fingertips, it's all because of internet being opened up. Obviously, it comes with evil of its own. I'd just say, like, I think we should look at this as an opportunity, as an ecosystem, all of us to collaborate and enable things for human beings at large, rather than thinking of this as what if things go wrong. Obviously, we'll all learn and fix what things go wrong. So that's what I'd say as Visa.
Right, one of the biggest takeaways, I think, Sujit, you mentioned that I think AI is going to play a very big role in democratization, right? I can talk from our example. As a smaller, startups, you could not have like 100 engineers. But now with coding assistants, coding IDs, with 2-3 engineers, we can actually build a lot of stuff. So I think similar things will happen, as Ravi, you were saying, for small and medium businesses. They can't have large technology teams and, all the wherewithals, but now they can actually use pretty much cutting edge technology which is available. So really looking forward to, seeing all your companies build agentic commerce, and we'll also play some role. So thank you so much. Thanks for all the insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, if I may request our panelists to please step forward, allow us an opportunity to capture you in one frame. Ladies and gentlemen, a hashtag GFF moment right there. Let's encourage them with a big, big round of applause to all our incredible panelists and speakers who've joined us and given us their valuable time. Thank you so much to each and every one of them